Over the past several episodes, we've been diving deep into creating lots of content that you can use for your business. We're starting with the idea that creating even just one great piece of content each week, like starting with a video, and then using tools to automate that and multiply it, you can end up with dozens of pieces of content from that one thing. Our guest today on the podcast is the amazing Irena Miller, and she is doing just that. I can't wait for you to hear her story of how she's using video to fuel the content for her business. And if you are struggling with or want to make content creation easier, I'd love for you to join me on a live Q&A on July 11th at 11:11 a.m. Pacific over on our brand new Facebook page. You can get all the details plus the show notes for this episode over at yongpratt.com/226. Enjoy today's episode. If you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, but something just kept you from doing that, you're not going to want to miss today's guest interview. Today we have Irena Miller, who is an intuitive yoga teacher and energy healer, and I am thrilled to bring her on the podcast today to share about the progress and the success of her new podcast, Everyday Inklings with Irena. Irena, I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Yong, for having me. What a joy to be here, and even more so because without you, there would never have been an Inklings with Irena podcast. It would still be a dream.
I love it. I love it. I would love for you to share the before the podcast story. How long was it that you wanted to launch your podcast before we found each other and connected and you were able to do podcasts in a weekend?
Yeah, I get goosebumps as you say that because really it was probably about 2.5 to almost 3 years that I had it in my heart to create a podcast. So much so that, when I came into the online space, podcasts were definitely, it seemed to be like a must-have. And as I was creating all of my paperwork, my journaling about what am I bringing, what is it that I have to share, who can I help, who is my ideal client, how could I get the message to them, I actually wrote the name of my podcast up and I taped it to my wallet. It's so funny because it's still right over there. And it took almost 2.5, almost 3 years to manifest. But what I discovered was before I met you that the idea of a podcast was very overwhelming. It was an industry that seemed very advanced and hard to break into. Everybody that I followed at that time, like the Pat Flynn's and the Marie Forleos, and even a yoga teacher that I knew way back in the day who became very big in the podcasting world, it just seemed like, I'll never be able to catch up. And where could I even begin? And so it kept getting pushed off and shelved and pushed off and shelved until I met you.
That's such an amazing story. And I think it's a story that I hear a lot. So many people have told me once I start to get to know them, they talk about wanting to do a podcast, and many of them for years and years. And like you, it was kind of, you see these big names and you think that, well, they're really big and they had millions of followers and millions of downloads. It's like, well, I'm not that. So I love that you were able to share what you do now, because what you bring to the table with your guided meditations and your visualizations and the way that you help us really get in touch with our intuitive side. And as busy entrepreneurs and moms and women, we forget about that side. It's something that kind of ebbs and flows. And I love that you're able to bring us back to that place where we can start to care for ourselves in a really intentional manner and really teach us that it needs to come from within. All of the good stuff we want to put out into the world, we need to feel and express in our own selves before we can share all those gifts with others. So I want to just commend you on bringing such a valuable skill and lessons to the whole world.
Oh, Yong, thank you so much. Oh, you say it just so beautifully. It makes me excited.
Such
It's
a
like, oh,
beautiful
yeah.
podcast. Oh my gosh.
You. Oh my goodness, thank you. It's fun for me to share. It really allows me to be creative and finally have a platform and a way to share that had been in my heart for so long. I just didn't have the first idea of where to start the journey and process. And we had known each other for a while in the online space. And when you started to share about your program and your course, and how it stripped away the mysticism and the mystery and intrigue behind these podcasts, that I'd have to have this big graphics team and a whole set of assistants ready for a launch party and all of this fanfare and build up. What you did was you stripped away the layers and you brought us to the group that I was with. Every group I know that's gone through, but even while I was there, I noticed just a feeling of, you stripped away kind of like what they say, the dog and pony show, all the lights and glitter. And you said, listen, this is what you need. And you held our hand and you brought us through step by step in such a beautiful, friendly, digestible way. It was a way that really drew out our heart's desire to make an impact on the world. And you showed me that it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to have 1 million followers. You don't have to have all this fanfare, but just the steps to be consistent. The graphics were in place thanks to you, the description, the keywords. You had thought of everything, and it was so wonderfully done. Like, really and truly, you can complete it in a weekend, and your podcast is up and running. I mean, I was blown away. Something that I had been thinking about for years and years and years. You're like, hang out with me for a weekend and I'll make magic happen.
I love hearing this story. Just bringing me so much joy that other people are now able to share their amazing and unique gifts and talents in a bigger way without making it seem like it's a daunting uphill battle the whole time.
Yeah.
Besides launching your podcast, what was the biggest takeaway that you got from participating in podcasts in a weekend?
Well, there's so many takeaways. So to focus on one, you know what I really, really loved was this theme that you brought throughout to make it possible. So again, what you say, so many of us, it seems like an uphill battle when it comes to recording a podcast. We think, I have to have a studio, or I've got to have a closet big enough to sneak in so there won't, like a sound room, won't be echoes, or I need a sound editor, and I need an intro, and I need an outro, and everything just makes our head want to explode. And the way that you presented the material in this very seamless fashion that took us through all of the areas that usually trip people up, somehow through you. And I know it's from your expertise. I'm still such a newbie with this. I'm like, how did she know? Expert. That's how you knew. But you knew the exact pitfalls that would trip us up, and you helped create this seamless integration and process. And yet you didn't stop there. But the tools that you shared with us and taught us about to help to pull the content from other areas where we were working. So for example, I have my weekly show every week on Facebook, and I was able, through your guidance, to pull that into an audio file, into a visual file, and then be able to bring that across platforms so that it wasn't just a podcast, but it became a video podcast. It became a blog post. It became so much more. And it was this seamless movement. It was so breathable. It was that integration. You have an incredible way about you, such a fantastic way of teaching and breaking things down so that you can go from 0 to like 100 within the blink of an eye. And many times in other programs, there's just been too many steps, too many pitfalls. We get tripped up. One little thing holds us up from moving forward, and then you're like, I just bought that course and I got nowhere. But for you, you really, really, you see us through from start to finish because you have that eagle eye and just know where those pitfalls could be, and you walk us through and help us avoid them. So that really is the biggest takeaway. I don't know.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And it's funny that you say that it's pretty step by step, and it's fast, because what I find, because we're all so busy, that adding one extra thing to our plate, sometimes that's the most daunting step. So to be able to simplify it and give you wins in a weekend, I love seeing all of my students go in there, completing a module or a lesson, and the next little piece is done. Like, we're building this Parthenon, with one little pillar at a time, and we just keep adding to it. And, this is the course that I wish I had when I first started podcasting. I took a class, but it was one of those, you're on your own, see you later, hope you do well. And it was just long, and it felt like, okay, first you have to go out and buy all the right equipment.
Oh, yeah.
That seems like that could be a stumbling block. So, I love being able to now share, okay, you know what, let me just fast track you there, because I've done that. I've felt that. I've experienced that pitfall. So let me just show you how to overcome that. So thank you for sharing that, because, again, that just lights me up and it brings me so much joy.
Yay. Well, thank you. Thank you for creating it. Oh my gosh.
So talk to us about who you created this podcast for. Who's the ideal listener?
Beautiful. So this podcast is really designed for the busy entrepreneur, the busy woman who has this feeling deep inside themselves that there is something more going on beyond what they see. They know at times they feel overstretched, overwhelmed, but even when life throws them curveballs, like your account gets hacked and funds stolen, your basement floods, or you miss that airline, that flight, they know somewhere beneath it all, there's this wonderful source of love and hope, and their faith builds because they realize that it's not the event itself that shapes them, that creates the world, that they become bitter and frustrated and feel like, anytime you try to put yourself out there, you get knocked down. But they realize there is something that they can reach out to, this loving source. And it shows up at times as angels and guides, but to ultimately know you're not alone, and that when it comes to making decisions, you have friends in high places, your unseen resources. And really my role is to help you speak that intuitive language, to open up the lines of communication. So that's really who this is designed for.
And I've learned so much from you and your podcast, from your amazing energy adventures to your yoga classes. What you bring to me when I listen is this voice of calm, a voice that shares that you can do this. You're not alone in this life that we're living. There are things outside of us that sometimes we're not even able to explain, yet we can sense them, we can feel them. And I love that you're not going so far. Sometimes when I listen to meditations, it's so far beyond me, it gets too metaphysical. And I have a hard time relating to that. So you are putting this metaphysical world and this capacity to get in touch with those unseen resources in a very practical, very doable, very, I can do this kind of way. So thank you for putting all that together.
Oh, thank you for saying it in that way. That means the world to me. Because it's something that I get excited about. The practices that I share, I really try to design them and even tune into the ones that are very easily woven into your day. Because like you said earlier, with the podcast in the weekend, we just don't have a lot of time to sit down and do a half an hour meditation or take the time and do a 90-minute yoga class. So how can we find that clarity and that calm within a few breaths, a few minutes, so that we do feel good about the choices we make? We feel ecstatic, no second guessing, no worrying. We know that we're on the right path.
So amazing. And for all of the moms and the parents out there listening, is this a podcast that you could listen to with your kids?
Yes, most definitely. And actually, a lot of my clients, their kids come on and listen to the podcast, and I get lots of feedback from the kids. They're wonderful. Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, it's a very, very friendly podcast. And the nice thing about letting your kids engage and join in with you in these practices is that children are so open to this world of the beyond. They haven't been fenced in by this is the only way it can be or that's the way it can be. Some of these beliefs that we develop as adults that really harness our imaginations. But kids are very open and they really have that opportunity to connect with their angels and their guides with great ease. So it's a lot of fun to bring them on.
So amazing that it's a resource for any age, any level. You just pop your earbuds in and you take a listen, or you watch your live weekly show and listen to it in real time and engage, because you're there to engage, which I also love.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I do love engaging with listeners.
So if there are listeners out there thinking, gosh, Irena's story is inspiring to me, and I really want to start this podcast, I'm just not sure what to do next. What would you tell them?
I would say talk to Yong. You need to talk to Yong. Seriously, because there is so much out there on developing podcasts, starting podcasts, and it tends to overwhelm. And when we're in that overwhelmed spot, we get into paralysis. We don't move forward. And Yong, you are somebody who has taken all of this information and distilled it into such a beautiful way, all the important pieces that we would need. We don't have to get overwhelmed with the details, like you said, all the audio equipment checklists that you got to go out and buy, and all these details. You really distill it down so we save tons of time, tons of money, and we see our podcast out there. And I was saying just a little bit earlier, it's such a thrill to open up iTunes or Spotify and be like, oh, there's my podcast. Oh my gosh. And I never, ever would have gotten there, Yong, if it wasn't for your guidance. There just were too many stumbling blocks.
Amazing. And I'm just so proud of you for stepping up and saying, yes, I want to do this, and being committed and making the work happen, because there is some work involved. However, it's one of those steps that gets us closer to reaching more of the people we want to reach. And I always talk about it in terms of multiplying your message. You have your video now and you have your podcast. Those could be two different types of audiences, and now you can really make a bigger impact reaching those people who aren't connected with you on Facebook, or maybe who aren't listening to podcasts. There's lots of avenues now for them to come to you and seek out your resources and your expert guidance. So yay for you for launching and putting your amazingness out into the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Yong. And I'm so grateful for all of your help and guidance. It's made a world of difference.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I want to make sure that listeners who want to know more about what you do and your podcast, where is the best place for them to connect with you?
They can definitely go to my website, irenamiller.com, and they'll find the link to my podcast there. And they'll also find wonderful, wonderful sources of inspiration, yoga videos, and meditations and visualizations. But the website is a great place to begin.
Such a great website. And you have this great picture of you and your doggie, I think, on the website. And it's just so welcoming and so friendly that, even our pets can come play with us when we're delving into all this goodness.
Most definitely. You'll find that the pets love the meditations and energy work. They always come around.
So much fun. Irena, I just want to commend you again for stepping up and saying yes, launching your podcast out into the world so more people can have access to your Everyday Inklings and how we can really tap into all those unseen resources ourselves. Thank you for saying yes to this podcast and for being here today.
Thank you, Yong. I really appreciate you having me.
So what did you think? Are you inspired to start your own podcast or put these principles of automation to multiply your message to work? If so, join me tomorrow for a live Q&A at 11:11 a.m. Pacific. You can get all the details at yongpratt.com/226. Catch you on the next episode.